Okay, let's be honest. Nobody really gets excited talking about inheritance tax, right? It's not exactly a party starter, but here's the thing. It's something that could affect a lot more of us than we think, especially here in the UK. With that nil rate ban frozen to 325,000 pounds and the residence nil rate ban at 175,000 pounds and all that until 2029-30, yeah, things could get a little bit, well, tricky down the line.
You're absolutely right. A lot of folks could be in for a surprise if they don't plan ahead.
Yeah, exactly. That's why today we're diving into this thing called a loan trust. It's all about getting smart with inheritance tax. From what I've read in these articles, it's almost like this financial loophole where you can reduce that inheritance tax burden without actually giving up control of your money. I mean, it sounds almost too good to be true.
It's not really a loophole, but it is a pretty savvy strategy.
Okay, so how does it work? Can you break this whole loan trust thing down for us?
Okay, well, think of it this way. Imagine you have this, treasure chest that you want to protect. You don't want to give it away just yet, but you want to make sure that everything inside it is safe and growing in value. A loan trust is like building a separate vault for that treasure. You keep the key so you can still access it. But the vault itself is, I don't know how to put this, outside your main castle.
Okay, I like that visual. So I'm not giving the treasure chest away entirely, but I'm setting up this separate vault to hold it.
Exactly. And this vault is the loan trust. And it's at these three main components. The trust itself, then the loan, and the investment. The trust is like the separate legal entity that holds your assets, that treasure chest. But instead of gifting those assets, you loan the money to the trust, like you're transferring the treasure into the vault. And really important here, it's an interest-free loan.
So it's like I'm lending money to my own super secure vault. What's the advantage of that?
Well, that's where the magic happens. The trust, now it has the money you loaned, uses it to invest. Often through something called a single premium investment bond. Kind of like planting a seed and watching it grow over time. Now, because this vault is separate, any growth from those investments, it's all considered outside of your taxable estate.
So the treasure in the vault is growing, and the taxman doesn't even know about it.
Exactly. It's a clever way to potentially reduce that inheritance tax burden later on, because the growth happened outside of your taxable estate.
All right, I'm starting to see the appeal here, but what about getting to the money? You said I still have the key to the vault, right?
Absolutely. You keep access to your original capital, that treasure you put in, through loan repayments. Think of it as taking some treasure back from the vault when you need it. Each repayment actually reduces your taxable estate, because technically you're just taking back what was always yours.
So I can take out as much treasure as I need.
Well, to a certain extent, yes. And then finally, there's the inheritance. When the time comes, whatever's left in the trust, the original treasure plus all that growth, it goes to your beneficiaries. And because that growth happened outside your taxable estate, it could mean a much smaller inheritance tax bill for them.
Okay, so that's the loan trust life cycle. Seems pretty straightforward. But I'm guessing there are some details and potential downsides.
You're right. While loan trusts have some pretty intriguing benefits, they're not one size fits all. There are definitely some details we need to unpack to really understand the whole picture.
Okay, well, let's unpack those details then. You've got me hooked. What are some things people should keep in mind with loan trusts?
Well, one big one is the 10-year anniversary charge. Discretionary trusts, the ones commonly used for loan trusts, well, they have this potential inheritance tax charge every 10 years.
Wait, so even with this vault set up, there's still a chance of getting hit with an inheritance tax bill?
Well, yes, but remember that loan part. That inheritance tax is calculated on the net value of the trust. So it's the value of the assets, the treasure, minus the outstanding loan. So a big outstanding loan can really reduce or even wipe out that 10-year charge.
So managing the loan is crucial. What else?
Another potential downside is that when you pass away, that loan has to be repaid to your estate, which might mean the trustees have to sell assets from the trust to get the cash, and that could trigger a capital gains tax liability.
Oh, so even after they inherit, my beneficiaries could still get hit with a tax bill.
It's possible, yes, but there are ways to try to minimize this. Like you could put a clause in your will that leaves the right to those loan repayments, to a surviving spouse, or even to the trust itself. It's all about careful planning and getting good advice. Speaking of advice, I think it's important to be clear about who might really benefit from a loan trust and who might want to consider other options.
Right, so who's the ideal candidate for this strategy and who should maybe steer clear?
So a loan trust could be really great for someone with a decent chunk of cash they want to invest, someone who wants access to their original capital, but also wants to work on reducing that potential inheritance tax burden. It's about thinking long-term and planning for the future.
So it's for someone who wants to be smart with their legacy, but isn't quite ready to give up control just yet.
You got it. But it might not be the best fit for someone who needs access to all of their money right away, including any growth. And if someone is totally fine with making big outright gifts to reduce their estate, well, a loan trust might be overkill.
So it's not a magic bullet. Sounds like getting personalized advice is key.
Definitely. The ins and outs can get pretty tricky. And you don't want to accidentally walk into a tax trap.
Yeah.
Getting advice from a financial advisor who really knows estate planning is key. They can help you get everything set up right and make sure it fits your needs and goals.
So it sounds like we've only just scratched the surface of loan trusts here. We cover the basics, but there's obviously way more to learn.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've laid the groundwork, and now we can get into some real-life situations. Some examples to really show how loan trusts can work.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's take a minute to digest all that, and then we'll dive into those real-world examples. We'll see how this loan trust strategy could play out in different situations. Okay, so are you ready to see how these loan trusts actually work in real life? I'm all about seeing how this plays out for different people.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's say we have someone who's worked hard, built up a business, and they have this, sizable nest egg just sitting there. They're starting to think about their legacy and want to make sure their kids, inherit as much as possible without getting hit by a big inheritance tax bill.
Right, and they've got this wealth, but they're not ready to give up control yet.
Exactly. So in this case, they could set up a loan trust, right? Lend, say, £250,000 to the trust. The trustees invest it wisely, let's say a modest 5% annual growth. Over 10 years, that could grow to over £400,000. Now, if they'd kept it in their bank account, it'd all be part of their taxable estate. But with the loan trust, that extra £150,000, that growth, is outside their taxable estate. That's a big chunk of change their kids could inherit without a huge tax burden.
Wow, that's a pretty compelling example. It really shows how a loan trust can, strategically shift that growth and make inheriting so much easier for their kids. Can you think of any other scenarios where a loan trust might be a good fit?
Oh, absolutely. So let's say we have someone nearing retirement. They've got a large pension pot, maybe like £500,000. They're excited about retirement, but they're also, a little worried about the inheritance tax. Like, what if they pass away before using much of that pension?
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. People don't want to see their savings get eaten up by taxes after they're gone.
Exactly. And this is where a loan trust could come in. They could take a lump sum, say £100,000 from their pension, and lend it to the loan trust. The trustees invest that money, and again, it can grow. And they've reduced the size of their taxable estate. If the investments do well, that growth happens outside their taxable estate, and it lessens the inheritance tax for their heirs.
Okay, so even with something like a pension, which has its own tax stuff, a loan trust can still give you that extra control over inheritance tax. That's pretty cool. We've been talking about reducing inheritance tax for the kids, but are there any advantages for the person setting up the loan trust while they're still alive? What's in it for them?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, it's not just about the next generation. There are benefits for the person setting it up, too. One thing is those loan repayments can actually provide a kind of income stream. You can request those repayments of your original loan from the trust at any time.
So it's like if you need some extra cash, you just ask your loan trust for some money back.
Yeah, it's like having a backup fund that's also working for you in the background, potentially reducing that future inheritance tax. Of course, you want to think carefully about the tax implications of those repayments. Definitely talk to a tax pro about that. Another thing is, while you're alive, you can actually be one of the trustees of the loan trust.
Wait, so I can be in charge of my own vault?
Exactly. You'd have a lot of control over how those assets are invested and how they're distributed. It's not like you're giving it all away. You still have a say in how things are managed.
Okay, I like that. It's a good balance. But are there ever times when a loan trust isn't the best option? When should someone maybe look into other strategies?
You're right. It's not perfect for everyone. Like, if someone needs to use all the growth on your investments right away, a loan trust might not be the best. You mainly have access to that original capital. The growth is really for the long haul.
So if you need those investment gains now, a loan trust isn't flexible enough.
Exactly. And another situation is if someone wants to, say, leave a big chunk of their estate to charity, there might be better ways to do that, like setting up a foundation or using other charitable giving stuff.
So before you even think about a loan trust, you need to figure out your goals, your timeline, and whether you want to give to charity.
Absolutely. And I can't stress this enough. Getting advice from a financial advisor or estate planner is so important. They can help you figure out the details, weigh your options, and make sure you're making the right decisions.
Solid advice. Okay, well, we've covered a lot here, explored the scenarios, the good and the bad of loan trusts. It's safe to say that these trusts can be powerful, but they're definitely not one size fits all.
I agree. And while we've talked a lot about the money side of things, we need
Hmm.
to remember that estate planning is about more than just the numbers. It's about making sure your legacy reflects what you believe in and what you want to see happen.
That's a great point. It's not just about the money. It's about making sure your wishes are carried out and that your loved ones are taken care of. So how about we shift gears a bit and talk about some steps people can take if they're interested in this whole loan trust thing. All right, so say someone's listening and they're like, okay, this loan trust thing, it's pretty interesting. I want to learn more, but where do I even start?
Yeah.
What are the first steps?
Well, first thing is don't rush into anything. We've given a good overview, but like with anything, the details are important. So before making any decisions, take some time to gather info, do some research.
Okay, makes sense. But where do they go for that? I mean, there's so much info out there.
Yeah, you're right. Start with reliable sources like the government website on inheritance tax. It can be a bit dry, but it's a good starting point. You can also look for guides from those big financial institutions. Just remember to double check the info and look for consistent details.
Yeah, a bit of healthy skepticism never hurt anyone.
Exactly. And this is where working with a financial advisor who knows this stuff is really important. They can cut through the jargon and explain things in plain English, in a way that makes sense for you.
Okay, so finding that expert guide is key. It's like having someone to hold your hand through this whole inheritance tax thing.
Hmm.
But before even meeting with someone, what can people do to get their own finances organized?
Oh, that's a good point. Before you even talk to an advisor, take stock of your own finances.
Mm.
Get all your asset info together, your property values, your savings, investments, pensions, everything.
Okay, so have a financial inventory ready. What else?
It's also helpful to really think about your goals. Like, what do you want this loan trust to achieve? Is it just about minimizing that tax? Are there other things you're hoping for? The clearer you are on what you want, the better your advisor can help you create a plan that works.
Okay, so knowledge, goals, and a clear picture of your finances. That's